Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a small video on uh, how much it costs to set up a high-tech uh, a planter tank, particularly in the range of 5 to 20 gallon, because that's what I actually do. So I wanted to actually do this video to talk a little bit on how much it actually cost. And in order to do that video, I've divided the aquarium setup into 4 different parts, and the costs are split between each one. And the first one is actually the aquarium itself, how much it costs to buy an aquarium. Then the hardscape. Uh, the next thing is plants and the fertilizers, and the last one is the accessories. So this is just based on my estimate. So what I'm going to talk is based on my estimate and the amount of money that I've spent. This could be plus or minus depending on where you buy, depending on your needs. So this is just a rough estimate on how much it takes. You can add plus or minus 50 to $100 to this. But this the purpose of this video is just to give an idea of how much it takes. So when you start a planter tank, or when you are having a mindset of starting a tank, you can just have an idea of how much it actually costs. Particularly, there are some things that you might probably not know that you need it, but then as you go through it, you end up buying it. So this video is just to give an idea of how what are the different components that you need for a planted tank, and more importantly, how much it actually cost. So with that, let's go into the video to see what it actually costs. The first thing that I wanted to talk is about the aquarium itself. And I've divided this into 3 categories. First one is a regular aquarium with rim. This is probably the most common type of aquarium that you see in any fish store, and they usually have a black color a frame on the aquarium, and these are really good for a starter kit, and they usually range from somewhere between $20 to $100 depending upon the size, and also depending upon the store. Some stores like Petco offer a cheaper during certain periods. They do offer a sale. They call it as a dollar per gallon sale. So you can get a 20-gallon aquarium for $20. This is a very good aquarium starter kit. So that is something to consider in. The second type of aquarium that I want to talk is about a rimless aquarium. This is a little bit of a next step to the regular aquarium. The difference between the rimless aquarium and an aquarium with the rim is you don't see the black rim on the rimless aquarium, and this gives a little bit of a good feel and good look and feel to the aquarium in itself. It's a little bit more expensive compared to the rimmed aquarium, and somewhere they can go somewhere between $45 to $120, for a 5 to 20-gallon aquarium, depending on where you buy them. But for a planted tank, this rimless aquarium is kind of like will look really good. So given a choice, between a rimless aquarium and a rim aquarium, I would go with the rimless aquarium for planted tanks. The last type of aquarium tank that I really wanted to talk is what is called a low iron rimless tank, and this is something that I would really suggest for a professional looking planted aquarium. You can actually clearly see a difference between a rimless tank and a low iron rimless tank. Uh, in a low iron rimless tank, the greenish tinge that you often see in the aquarium glasses will be very, very minimum. And what that will do is it will actually make the plants, especially the bright colored plants like AR, to appear really, really beautiful in a low iron rimless tanks. And because of the fact that it's a low iron, these are the most expensive among all the 3 types. But if you really wanted to do a planted aquarium, I would really, really suggest going with a low iron rimless tank. They can come somewhere between $80 to $220, but it'll just be worth the cost. The next category is the hardscape. And the hardscape consists of stones that we use in the aquarium, then driftwood, and finally the aquarium substrate. Uh, the aquarium substrate in itself is a big topic to talk about the different layers of aquarium substrate, but I'm just keeping it a little bit simple, for easier explanation purposes, as to base and inner substrate. So talking about the stones first, right? Stones is one of the important part of the hardscape. In whatever style that we use, we generally use stones, whether it's a simple Iwagumi style or any style for that matter, we use stones. So depending on the size of the aquarium, whether it's a 5 gallon or 20 gallon aquarium, the amount of stones that we buy actually changes. And these stones usually cost somewhere between 15 to $50, and depending on the type of stone that we have, the price might change a little bit more. But in general, somewhere it costs between 15 to $50. The second part of the hardscape is the driftwood, and I don't use much of a driftwood in my layouts, but there are folks who use a lot of driftwood, and driftwood certainly adds an element of uniqueness to the planted aquarium. And the driftwood are also very expensive, and sometimes they cost somewhere between $20 to $30, or somewhere and sometimes even more than that. If you're going with a bigger aquarium, then driftwood might even cost much more. So that's the size of the aquarium that I'm talking here is somewhere between 5 to 20 gallon. So for 5 to 20 gallon aquarium, usually the driftwood can cost somewhere between 20 to 30. On a higher side, it can go up to $50. The last category of the hardscape that I want to talk is the aquarium substrate in itself. The aquarium substrate is very, very essential, and there are different types of aquarium substrates that are available, and what kind of substrate to use and what kind of substrate to not use. That's a totally different video, but an aquarium substrate is an expensive as well. And for a 5 to 20 gallon tank, an aquarium substrate can cost somewhere between $20 to $40. That will include the base layer of the aquarium substrate, and if you're using any inert or any sand in the front, that's that'll add beauty to it. So in general, the aquarium substrate can cost somewhere between $20 to $40. The total cost of hardscape, for a 5 to 20 gallon tank should be somewhere between $55 to $120, plus or minus. The design and aquascape that you are using might reduce this cost, but in general, this is somewhere a range to keep in mind. The plants and fertilizers are really the most important part of a planted aquarium, and as you might all know that the plants can be a foreground plants, then you can have midground plants and sometimes background plants. You can also use java moss to fill in wherever you want. The type of plants and also the look and feel of the plant totally depends on the type of design that you're actually doing in a planted tank. Some styles like Iwagumi styles would not require too much of a background plan. It only depends on certain varieties of carpet plants and one or two plants. So that is a simple style. But if you're going with a natural style, then that might require a lot of a background plants. So the type of aquascape that you're doing totally dictates what kind of plants that you actually go for. So this is just a classification. In some tanks you might not even use a carpet plants. In some tanks you might not even use foreground. You can directly go with midground. So the options are usually a lot. It depends on the aquascape variety that we do. One of the things that I've seen that I wanted to actually point here is the carpet plants. Generally, I try to do a carpet from seeds only because of the fact that the plants are really expensive, right? So each box of plants can cost close to $10 to $12, and I usually try to buy them from online purely because of the fact that I get a lot of variety in the plants. So what I try to do is, with particularly with the carpet plants, I try to grow them from seeds because it can save me a lot of money. But rest of the other plants, depending on your need, depending on how you want, you can actually propagate them yourself. So just be wary of the fact that in a planter tank, the plants are very expensive. So try to carefully plan it out so that you don't burn your pocket. The second thing that in this category I want to talk a little bit is about the fertilizers. And the fertilizers are very very essential for a planter tank. And they come up. I usually use liquid fertilizers, but if you're using heavy stem plants, then you can go with the root tab along with the liquid fertilizers. Depending on the aquascaping, you definitely need to have fertilizers. And I'm mentioning this category because they are quite expensive and they can run somewhere between $25 to $30. That is a combination of micro and macronutrients. But if you're going separately with micronutrients and then a separate fertilizers for macronutrients, then it might be even more expensive. The last category that I found very very helpful, and I feel that the money that I've invested in that is worth every single cent, is actually the tweezer set. And it is very very essential for a planter tank. It really helps you to set up the aquarium planter tank in a really nice fashion. And every week when I'm actually trimming the plants or when I'm doing a new aquascaping, I really thank that I bought the tweezer set. So that is something to consider about. So in general, the plants and fertilizers together can come between 81 to $250. And in the later half of the video, I'll tell a little bit about how you can save in plants. But there's only so much you can save. The cost of a planter tank comes a lot from the plant in itself. So just be aware of that, and just calculate accordingly. So the accessories are some of the unsung heroes of a planter tank. And also in terms of money, this is something that we usually overlook. And unfortunately, these accessories can come to be very expensive. So I created this category called accessories, and I wanted to discuss the costs associated with these accessories. The first one that I wanted to talk is actually the canister filter. So the canister filters are very expensive, and they can run somewhere between $50 to $80 for a 5 to 20 gallon tank. And there are cheaper alternatives to canister filter, particularly the hangback filter and things like that. Those are much cheaper. They come $15 to $20 a piece. But unfortunately, for a planter tank, the most important component of a planter tank is actually the flow. The flow is what will actually move the carbon dioxide across the tank, and lack of those movement can cause a lot of algae growth. And unfortunately, canister filter is the solution for that. And unfortunately, canister filters are also expensive. So think about using a canister filter. Even if the tank is very small, a canister filter will make a huge difference. Maybe not so much for a 5 gallon tank, but once you start to touch that 9 to 10 gallon aquarium, consider investing in a canister filter, because that will really really help. So the cost of the canister filter goes somewhere between $50 to $80, depending on the model and brand. And there are some videos that that can actually help you make a DIY canister filter. But purely because of the fact that this is an indoor aquarium, this is a planted aquarium, I would rather spend that money, because the beauty of the aquarium should not be spoiled by the DIY filter. So the next, after the canister filter, the next important thing is the light. And this is a very very important component. The light in the aquarium can vary between $20 to $80. For a 5 to 20 gallon tank. You don't have to buy a fancy light for $150 or $200 or something like that. Somewhere between $20 to $80. Not too cheap of a light, because that might not result in a good plant growth. At the same time, not too expensive, because it can burn a hole in our pocket. So somewhere between that is good enough. The other important thing is the heater, which is mostly overlooked accessories. It's not that expensive. You can get a good heater for 20 gallons, somewhere between $10 to $20. The Because this is a high-tech tank, you definitely are going to inject CO2 into it. And one of the most important component is to check the level of CO2 in the aquarium. And a drop checker is something that comes in to check that. It costs somewhere between $15. I would highly recommend this, particularly during the initial stages of the tank. The fluctuation in CO2 can cause a lot of algae, particularly the green fuzz algae. The most important, or I would say another important component of the planted high-tech tank is the CO2 in itself. Right? So the CO2, you can get a CO2 a big setup, but because it's actually a simple 10-gallon or 5-gallon tank, I find it very difficult to go and buy a huge CO2 a container and then have a separate a place under my aquarium for that. So for me, it didn't make sense. So because it's a 10 to 20 gallon aquarium, I usually go with a simple a CO2 setup, which comes with a bubble counter and a diffuser. And the counter and the diffuser will actually help you to make sure that the right amount of CO2 goes into the aquarium. And the diffuser will also make sure that a simple stone diffuser will make sure that it gives a good look and feel. At the end of the day, since this is a planted tank, it has to look good. I don't really like to have a huge CO2 a can sitting in the bottom of my tank. I want it to be very sleek and simple. Had I gone with a bigger tank, maybe like a 50 or a 75 gallon, I would have gone for a bigger CO2 setup. But for my small tank, this actually worked out really great. So that will cost you somewhere around $60, for the whole setup, which I use a Fluval 20G CO2 kit. It did come up with a diffuser, but I replaced the diffuser that came up with that with a small a stone diffuser, and I also used a bubble counter. So together it costed me $60. And then every month you have to pay for cartridges. That will come around like $15. And finally, I found it in a really hard way that the most important part of keeping a clean aquarium is to actually use a glass scraper blade for the aquarium glasses. Because of the fact that we are using a low iron tank, we don't want any scratches or anything to come in. So this is one of the very important part of keeping the aquarium glasses clean. So together, the accessories are very expensive. It can come somewhere between $200 to $300. And that is why I wanted to have a separate section to just bring it out that, these are all the accessories and these are very expensive. So just keep in mind when you're actually working on a planted tank that the accessories are very expensive as well. So finally, the total cost of a planted aquarium tank, particularly the 5 to 20 gallon tank, the total cost comes somewhere between $518 to $808. This is just based on my experience with the planted tanks. So planted tanks are not cheap. They are expensive. Their cost primarily comes from the plants, as well as all the accessories that we need to set up the plant. This is particularly the high-tech planted tank. A low-tech planted tank can be a little bit cheaper, but still the cost might be somewhere around the same. The fact that the planted aquarium is really expensive, I didn't know about the expense part until I started doing it and realizing that these are all the things that I need. Not just the aquarium, not just the plant. There are a lot of things that you really need. So one thing on the other will lead you up to $500 to $800 even without realizing it. So I wanted to actually make this video to actually give a little bit of an idea of how much it actually takes. So when someone is actually starting a planted tank, they'll be a little bit aware of this is how much the cost it is. As you can see, like $500 to $800 is not a cheap amount. Now the fact that we know that it actually costs $500 to $800, right? So is there a way that we can make it a little bit cheaper? And that is what I want to talk a little bit in the next section, which is how can I save in the in the planted tank. Generally, you can actually still save some money, but you're not going to save so much that it's going to be $100. It's not going to be like that, but definitely you can shave some cost of the overall cost. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is about the hardscape stones. The stones cost close to $50, right? So we can actually get, if you are lucky enough to live in a place which has some rivers, and again check the local authorities and things like that of moving the rocks and stones from the river. But if that is an option that you have, you can definitely get stones from the rock, stones from the river. Again, the aquascaping is all about coming up with a different idea. It's not about a specific stone. It's not about a specific variety. It's about how we can actually present it in a really nice way. So if you're able to actually scavenge for some hardscape stones, that will definitely save a lot of money. The other thing that I've also found is instead of getting the inert rocks or inert stones or pebbles and a pea gravel from an aquarium store, if you're able to get it from a Home Depot or Lowe's, it's much cheaper there. So that is something that we can actually think about. One of the things that we have to just consider is when we actually get stones from a Home Depot or Lowe's or any of the stores, just rinse it in a hot water and you should be good. The second thing that I've always found to be very cheap is actually buying plants from the local fish store. You can definitely save about $20 to $30 easily if you buy it from a local fish store. And the only disadvantage of going with a local fish store is you might not find the plants that you need. So you probably have to some sort of a wait and see approach. So it's a little bit difficult in that aspect. But in terms of prices, the local fish store are always the best place. And if you are in a place where you have a aquascaping enthusiast association and things like that, that is probably a place where you can actually buy these plants as well. And again, the stones and plants, it's not about selecting a specific kind of plants. It's just how you represent the plants and how you're able to come up with a really good design with those. So your innovation plays a very important role rather than plants and hardscape. So consider alternatives for hardscape and plants as well. The other thing that I found which is really helpful is propagating our own plant, meaning you buy one plant, then keep propagating it. So for the next tank that you're actually doing, you can use the plant from your previous tanks. So propagation is a nice way to extend the hobby to another tank. But still, the initial cost is still the cost. You can, for the next tank, you might be able to save some money if you propagate it, but definitely the initial cost will be there. However, propagation is a very nice mechanism. So I usually have a couple of tanks just for the propagation. I have 4 tanks, and I use it for propagation of plants, and I have 1 tank where I do an aquascaping. Something to think about. The other option is the fourth option is where you can actually save money is buying CO2 in bulk, right? So you can get a lot of CO2 cartridges, a big container, very cheap. That will be very good in a long term. For a year or two, it will definitely save you money. I personally use cartridges, 20-gram cartridges, because of the aesthetic purposes, nothing more than that. The last option is to consider buying pre-owned supplies. And I'm having this as a last option purely because this is a planted tank and we want to look at as professional as possible. So sometimes the pre-owned stuff might not help you to do it. Particularly, aquarium tanks. If a previous owner was not taking care of the aquarium properly, you can see some scratches in the tank. So those kind of things I would avoid. Uh, Pre-owned supplies is also good, but just be wary of what you're getting. And also, we don't know how the owners maintained it. So even when we get it as a pre-owned supply, just make sure that you take precautions and clean it up so that it is good. The other options that you can consider for pre-owned are hardscapes, driftwoods, canister filters, lights, all these things. Just be wary of the fact that someone has owned it and we don't know how he handled it. So it is always essential to make sure that when you're buying, everything is working according to how it's supposed to be. And once we get into the house, also make sure that it's cleaned thoroughly, and then start using it. And that's pretty much it for this video, guys. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found the information useful. And these are some of the the data based on my experience. And things could change a little bit depending on how you see it and the stores that are next to you. And also, this is particularly for the folks who are in the US. So if you are outside of US, things might change a little bit. But I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching.